Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Brett's Brain. Today we're going to talk about how much of your company you should own after you raise different rounds of venture capital. Hey, I'm Brett Burrell, former entrepreneur, current venture capitalist. Thanks so much for checking out the channel. Make sure you share, like, subscribe, tell your friends. Our goal here is to help entrepreneurs succeed. So if you have questions that we can help with along your journey, let us know. Be happy to answer them. Okay, a question that I've been getting a lot recently is how much of my company should I own? Or do I have a messed up or broken cap table because I only own X percent of my company? Well, it's actually a really important thing for founders to be thinking about. How much dilution is okay for you to take at each round? And when are you at the point where your cap table might become a hindrance to your ability to raise future rounds of capital? Let's back it up and talk about why does this matter at all? Well, obviously, at the end of the day, everybody that's investing or building a company wants to have a great financial outcome. They want to own that company. They also want to have the ability to make decisions on what's right or wrong for the company and make those really important big decisions like, should we sell? Should we IPO? So it's two things. One is the ownership and the financial portion of it. One is the control portion of it. And both are tied together and tied to how much of the stock, the outstanding shares do you actually own? And so those are the two parts of it. The other thing that's going on here is in an investor's mindset is how much do we want these founders to be incented by the equity that they have in their company? And so as you get further and further along, you take more and more dilution, but all of the investors across the entire journey want entrepreneurs to have a large portion. They want entrepreneurs to be really incented by the stock that they have in their company. They don't want those entrepreneurs and the active founders or the active entrepreneurs in the company to own 1% because then there's just not as much incentive for them to keep working, day and night and putting all their blood, sweat, and tears and every thought that they have into the company. It's not to say that entrepreneurs also shouldn't pay themselves a salary. I'm a firm believer that they should. But that's what's going on in investors' head, is that the equity upside, the equity that you own, is really important to us. We want you to have a huge share of your company so you continue to have that motivation, that drive to put in the hours, to put everything that you put into building the company. And we know that investors that invest after us want you to have that too. So even from the earliest stages, we care about how much ownership you have, because if you don't have enough, eventually we're going to get squashed down or we're going to get recapped and we're going to lose our ownership percentage. A lot of terminology there that's really important. But let me just give you a few baselines and then we can talk about some of those things a bit later. So when you're going to raise your pre-seed, who knows how much you should give up or what you should give up. But it's varying all over the place, but you should probably own at least still 85 to 90% of your company after you raise a pre-seed round when you go to raise your seed round. If we're looking at founders that own less than 80% of their company when we're getting ready to invest at a seed stage, it starts to get a little scary for us. It starts to get, okay, are they going to have enough ownership before they go to raise their Series A? So after our seed round, we want founders to own at least 50% of their company still. So that's really important. We don't expect for investors or any preferred shareholders to have the majority ownership of your company after a seed round. Ideally, you're still above 60% after your seed round. And if you've been able to maintain, ownership greater than 80% going into your seed round, then after your seed round, you should still be able to be above that 60% mark as a founder. And after your Series A is usually the first time a founder is going to fall below that 50% ownership level. And here, again, if you fall below 40% after a Series A, you're starting to get into the area that gets really scary for investors and might give you a broken cap table that needs to be fixed by future investors. And it might make it more difficult to raise subsequent rounds of capital. And so those are just a couple of bands that, again, they're moving bands. There's no black and white here like everything in fundraising. But they're bands that you should be thinking about as you go to raise. Now, what happens if you fall out of these bands or well out of these bands? And why do us as a seed stage investor really care? Those are tied together. So after our seed stage, I mentioned we want you to own at least 50%, ideally more than 60% of your company still. The reason isn't because I think that you're going to be any more motivated owning 60% of your company than you are 40% of your company. In both those cases, I think you as a founder are going to be equally motivated. And I know when I was a founder, I would have been equally as motivated to run my company owning 40% or 60% of my company. But once you start down the venture path, The reality is to build a big giant company, you're probably going to raise another 4 rounds after us or 5 rounds after us. And if you're already really low, what's going to happen is in your Series A or your Series B, the investors that want to invest in your company are going to come in and say, hey, you only own 20% of your company right now. Well, we want to change that. And founders, we want you to own more. And as a founder, that's a great thing. But as an investor, what that means is you're going to take the brunt of the dilution. And so what might happen is what's called a recap, where the investors say, hey, we're going to invest. We'll put $20 million into your Series B. But before we do that, we want you to create a 30% equity pool where all your existing investors are going to take 30% dilution before this round. And that 30% is going to get reissued to existing active employees and founders of the company. Because we need to get you re-upped, because you had fallen all the way to 10%. We need to get you back to 40% before we invest. So the current investors on the cap table all kind of take that cram down or that squash down, and they're going to take 30% dilution at that point. And then let's say you raise $20 million at a $100 million valuation, they're also going to take 20% more dilution. And so their ownership effectively just dropped in half, while the founders actually increased ownership, which is great. Founders should own portions of their company. But that's why at the earliest stages, we still care about it. Because we know if we invest early on and the cap table's still clean and within those bands that are acceptable, that 30% cram down isn't going to happen in the future. Or it's less likely to happen in the future. We're more likely to maintain normal ownership and just take the dilution alongside the founders as we go to raise additional capital round after round after round. And so that's why it matters all the way from the beginning and how we kind of think about it. And at the end of the day, the goal here is great. We want founders to be incented and to own large enough portions of their company where they feel excited to continue to work. One last thing before I sign off is that it's really important to know that founder ownership is active founder ownership. Really important note here. And so active founder ownership. So it can't be you co-founded your company with 3 people. 2 of them aren't actively working on your company. And you only own 20% and your other 2 own 20% each. That would be 60% after a Series seed, right? That might sound good on paper because the founders own 60%. But that's not the way investors look at it. We want the people that are actively in the company building it to have that ownership. And so it's not just founder ownership. It is active employee and active founder ownership that we want to have within those bands, because that's what we care about. The people that are still in the business, still working hard on it, still living, breathing, thinking about it every waking moment. Hopefully this is helpful. Thanks so much. Make sure you share, like, subscribe, and ask us questions so we can help you in next videos.